Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Continuation of daily reading of Lord Meher, the biography of the Avatar of the Age, Meher Baba, Volume 1 by Bahu Kalchari, page number 33. Topic is on Tajuddin Baba, Crown of the Prophet. On this page we see Tajuddin Baba sitting, and it reads as, "No one could understand him." Tajuddin Baba, Crown of the Prophet. No one could understand him or had any idea who he really was. No one knew that Taj was the crown. Muslim perfect master Tajuddin Baba, probably taken at the asylum in Nagpur near the turn of the century. This is the caption for the photo. Several British ladies were chatting over a Friday afternoon cup of tea at the country club when suddenly they saw a naked man walking across the tennis court. Outraged by this shocking spectacle and thinking the fellow must be insane, they summoned the police, who arrested him, then had him sentenced to be locked up in a lunatic asylum. This lunatic, however, was wonderfully strange and different. A crowd would gather outside the walls of the asylum, awaiting his blessings. A separate entranceway was erected to asylum just so people could see this lunatic. Why? Was he really mad, or were the people who committed him mad? Why would people seek the blessings of this particular madman? It was the wine he alone had. Although British considered him Mohammedan, mad, they must have been the maniacs, for they did not recognize him. He was an owner of a spiritual wine shop. He was the Taj of India, the crown of Islam. He was Tajuddin Baba, a Qutub, a pivot of the universe, an axis of cosmic forces. This perfect master opened his wine shop in a mental asylum, and the people who flocked to him became intoxicated and divinely mad. It was this Mohammedan who was not mad. Why would such a man have had himself locked up in a madhouse? Ordinary people cannot fathom this mystery. Had he not come for the mad himself? For those lost in the madness of this world, this Qutub's 16 years in that asylum were a phase of his inner work. The Mohammedan youth was not mad when he was locked up in the asylum. It was the world around him. It was the whole world which is mad. Only a man who is one with God is truly sane. Tajuddin Baba was a unique master who lived among the maddest of the mad, and he, the Lord of the mind, made his spiritual headquarters in the mental asylum. On the morning of January 17, 1861, in the town of Kamptee, outside of Nagpur in central India, the anxious family of Mariambi received the joyful news that she had given birth to a son at 5:15. But curiously enough, the baby did not cry when removed from the womb. Was the baby born dead? Some wondered. Do not dare think that, others counted. This is Mari Ambi's firstborn. The boy remained lifeless for some hours. Finally, legend has it that the family decided the baby's temple and forehead should be branded with hot iron. The hot iron would either make the baby open his eyes and cry, or else he was indeed dead. An elder of the family was chosen to do that. The iron rod burned the baby's flesh, and he cried loudly. He remained still, but as the tears flowed, he looked around as if examining those surrounding him. Finally, the baby moved, to the delight of the family. The boy was named Tajuddin Muhammad Badruddin. Literally, Tajuddin means one who wears a crown. In this instance, the crown of Prophet Muhammad. His father, Sayyid Muhammad Baruddin, was a soldier, a battalion commander in the British Army. Just before the birth of his son, he was transferred to Kempty from Madras. Syed was proud to have a son and thanked the all merciful Allah that this boy had lived. Tragedy, however, soon befell the Baharuddin's household. When Tajuddin was just a year old, his father died. Mariambi did her best to raise a son who could have made Syed proud. The boy went to fine elementary school at the age of 6 and was considered an above average student, but tragedy again befell. When he was 9 years old, Tajuddin's mother died. The burden of raising the young boy fell on his maternal grandmother. Unique spiritual qualities were detected in Tajuddin even at the early age. The boy continued with his schooling and learned Arabic, Persian, Urdu, as well as English. He was also an avid reader. Tajuddin rapidly advanced in higher education until he was 18 years old, when a wonderful event occurred that changed his life. In Nagpur, there was a renowned saint, Peer, named Hazrat Abdul Shah, who was highly revered by the Mohammedan community. One day, this saint visited Tajuddin's school and, observing the young man, remarked, "Why should this boy be in school? What is the need for him to study? What is left for him to learn? The young man already possesses gnosis, divine knowledge." The saint approached Tajuddin and his eyes met, and their eyes met. Taking a biscuit, Abdul Shah ate half and gave the other half to Tajuddin. The saint spoke as the young man chewed the biscuit. "Eat less, sleep less, speak less, and study the Quran as if the Prophet Muhammad has his very eyes on you." No sooner had Tajuddin eaten the biscuit that the ghazal of wine began singing in his heart, and his eyes shed tears of longing before the saint. The young man disappeared from the school and for 3 days remained in a blissful state of tears, longing to see his beloved. The saint had aroused the spiritual longing of Tajuddin's soul for knowledge of God. Tajuddin changed. He was no longer an avid student. He now preferred solitude, and his interest in socializing with his friend wanted. He had received an inner treasure but had no idea what it was. Although he had become a loner and a stranger to his friends, the young man gradually came out of that state and appeared reasonably normal. At this time he began reading the Divan of Hafiz and with fervor. The words of Hafiz came alive, and the following couplet impressed him profoundly. "Drink wine, set the Quran and Kaaba afire. Go stay in a temple and don't bother anyone." Tajuddin was drinking divine wine. He was burning the Quran and Kaaba in the flames of his heart. He had entered his own inner temple of solitude and was in a blissful state. It was in 1879 that worldly circumstances led Tajuddin to encounter his beloved master. Black clouds came over the district. Heavy rains caused terrible flooding of the Kanhan River. Recruits were being sought by the army to meet the disaster. The town of Kempty suffered severe damage. Many people had drowned or lost their homes. To ease the financial situation of his distressed grandmother, Tajuddin enlisted in the army. Although the young man was inwardly calling out to God and his heart was aroused to meet him, his heart had become a wine cup of song. "Where are you? Where are you? O beloved, come. Call me to you, or come yourself. I can wait no longer." Beloved, God is always merciful, and hearing Tajuddin's wholehearted cry, it could not remain indifferent. The young man's enlistment in the army would eventually lead him to the one he sought. As his regiment was soon transferred from Kempty to Sagar. Sagar means ocean. Tajuddin was destined to go to Sagar to turn into an ocean. While the other soldiers were being trained to fight the enemy, Tajuddin was fighting within himself. For a soldier to conquer an enemy is simple in comparison to overcoming one's own limited self and gaining victory over the false ego. He was a secret war. His was a secret war. How can one gauge the inner struggle of a young Tajuddin? He was his own soldier, trying to be courageous amidst a terrible inner battle. Tajuddin helped ignominious defeat upon his inner enemies, and his heart was feverish with the victory cry, Beloved, beloved, beloved. At last one night, when Tajuddin was on guard duty, he heard someone's voice call out to him. Startled, he looked around and then walked in the direction from which the voice came. He treaded beyond the barracks and entered the thick forest. Making his own path through the woods, eventually he found an old man seated under a tree. It was Muslim Qutub, renowned in the district, Hazrat Dao Chisti. He was the real beloved who had filled Tajuddin's heart with restlessness. Without looking at Tajuddin, the old master ordered the youth to bring him a cup of hot tea. Walking out of the dark forest, Tajuddin went back to the barracks kitchen where he boiled a fresh cup of tea. Again finding his own pathway through the forest, Tajuddin brought the hot cup of tea unspilled. After sipping a little, Tao Chisti gave the remaining portion of the tea to Tajuddin and told him to drink it. As soon as Tajuddin drank the tea, his inner restlessness instantly became ablaze and changed into an ocean of bliss. Tajuddin at that moment attained God realization. In his godhood, the whole world was no longer extinct. It turned into zero. Everything vanished. Tajuddin lost all consciousness of his body and the outside world. He was experiencing Anal Haq, and I am God state. He had only the consciousness of the divine I, and he had become God. In Sagar, at the age of 18, Tajuddin was transfigured into Sagar, an infinite ocean. The young Tajuddin had become a majzoob, one drowned in God. The young man automatically ignored the army routine, and because he was behaving unusually, his fellow soldiers were convinced he had gone mad. But in truth, he was merged with infinite bliss, infinite power, and infinite knowledge. Every night, Tajuddin would wander through the woods to find Hazrat Dawood Chisti and sit with him for hours. Tajuddin's grandmother still cared about him and had arranged for his marriage to a Muslim girl. But because of the young man's peculiar state of mind, the family of the girl broke the engagement. Shortly after his night of realization, the officials found him no longer suitable for military duty, so his grandmother had to go to Sagar and bring him back to Kempty. In Kempty, Tajuddin's grandmother was also soon convinced he had gone mad. Seriously disturbed by his condition, the woman sought every type of medical treatment for her grandson, but the treatments proved to have no effect, and Tajuddin's peculiar condition did not alter. Soon afterwards, his grandmother died, and Tajuddin was left alone. No one knew how alone Tajuddin really was. It was virtually impossible to withdraw within oneself and be alone, severing all karmic attachments and ordinary association. To be truly alone as God Himself is the aim of life. Tajuddin had achieved this goal despite his outward behavior. He was God conscious and oblivious of his external environment. Left alone in his grandmother's house, Tajuddin's relatives abandoned him, despising him as an incurable lunatic. For 4 years he lived thus, and the young man was prey to torture and anguish by the cruel townspeople. But Tajuddin's real agony was in regaining normal consciousness. Although living in dissolution, Tajuddin was in the state of mazubiyat and a mazjub. Though drowned in the infinite existence of God, is a master of all bliss. Suffering cannot affect a majjub because he has no human consciousness. To become a kutub, a perfect master, such as a God-realized person, must be brought down from the God state and regain normal consciousness of first the mental, then the subtle, and the gross world. In this coming down, there is nothing but suffering. The agony was Tajuddin's real suffering, not loneliness, not insanity. However, during these 4 years, Tajuddin appeared more raving mad. At last, pitying his nephew's condition, his maternal uncle Abdul Rahman took the young man of 22 to his home in the town of Chanda. There, too, Tajuddin was medically treated, but his condition failed to appear improved. Convinced his case was incurable, under Abdul also Uncle Abdul also abandoned his nephew to destitute and madness. Back in Kempty, Tajuddin suffered terribly both physically and mentally. He became a mockery to the family, the village fool. Neither his uncle nor anyone else except Dawood Chisti understood that he was suffering in order to regain his human consciousness, to come back into real creation consciousness so that the suffering of all humanity could be lessened. To escape the streets of Kempty, Tajuddin spent most of his time wandering the surrounding hills. Each time when he would re enter the city, people took a deep notice of him and gradually became aware that he was not mad in the ordinary sense. Nevertheless, children would continuously harass him. They teased him and threw stones, but Tajuddin never stopped them. He would collect the stones that hit him so that he would not be thrown again, that they could not be thrown again. Being pelted with stones may have been instrumental in helping Tajuddin regain normal human consciousness. Through these mischievous children and their apparent tormenting, Dawood Chisti were probably bringing Tajuddin back to full creation consciousness, because soon after several severe stoning, Tajuddin started acting normal. No one knew that he had become a Qutub. Tajuddin was then only 22 years old. Gradually, the young perfect master became highly regarded. Once, while he was strolling through the town, he suddenly entered the house of a weaver. Tajuddin forcefully told the man, "Gather your family and valuables and immediately leave this house." The man hesitated for a moment, but he was so impressed by the saintly patronage of the intruder that he complied with the warning. Within a few moments after leaving, the house caught fire and burned to the ground. The man's family and some valuables were thus saved. On another occasion, a man sought out Tajuddin and then pleaded, "Hazrat, come, my daughter is on the verge of death." The man had sought the best possible medical advice, but the girl's condition had not improved. Tajuddin closed his eyes and after a few moments smiled, saying, "Your daughter is all right now. Go to her." The man returned home and was amazed to find his little girl sitting up in the bed eating dinner. When he asked his wife how she had recovered so quickly, his wife answered, "Just a few minutes before you arrived, a wandering beggar came to the door asking for alms, and I gave him some food. He inquired about our daughter, and I showed him into the room. He was with her for only a few moments, and when he left, he said, 'Do not worry anymore. She'll be all right.'" Start from there.
Later, when this family went to see Tajuddin, the wife declared that he was the same medicant who had come to see the house. Nearly 10 years passed while Tajuddin lived in the streets of Kamptee, often sleeping on a bridge near the railroad station. During the day or night, he would roam all over the city. Although he appeared as a madman to a stranger or a fakir to others who knew him, Tajuddin was actually perfected and functioning as a Qutub at that time. Then on August 26, 1892, the outrageous incident that caused Tajuddin to be incarcerated by the British authorities in the mental asylum occurred. Although there was an uproar of protest among the local people, especially Mohammedans, however, because one of the British woman at the tennis club had been so mentally disturbed by the sight of the naked man. The woman's husband had been outraged by this incident and, using his influence, had forced the authorities to incarcerate this Muslim. Tajuddin's trial received considerable attention, and during this time the judge became drawn to him. Although Tajuddin was dressed in poor attire, the judge kept seeing him dressed like a king. The judge became distressed by the court proceedings. Despite the hesitation of the judge, however, the British authorities compelled him to sentence Tajuddin to the asylum for the rest of his life. Tajuddin was 31 years old when he was taken in chains to the asylum a few miles outside the city of Nagpur. Today this place is a public mental hospital, but then it served as a prison for lunatics where those inside were sentenced to life imprisonment, a place where once locked up keys were thrown away. It was a madhouse. There was virtually no medical treatment for the inmates, and their condition was pitiable. Dressed in long green gown, Tajuddin would perform manual labor along with the other inmates, but those in charge of the asylum got an inkling of his real stature. They tried to prevent him from doing this demeaning work, breaking stones and moving dirt. Tajuddin, however, refused to stop and insisted on continuing the strenuous task done by the other inmates. Once Tajuddin was carrying an iron container, a gamela full of earth, on his head. The officials of this institution were amazed to see that a large iron pan was not resting on his head but was actually suspended some inches in the air. Tajuddin would move about nonchalantly while everyone saw this. From time to time he would display occult power as such incidents would occur, thus strengthening the inmates and officials' faith in his spiritual stature. As the years went on, whenever Tajuddin wished to leave the asylum, the officials would later find the locks on the gates had dropped off. To leave the asylum grounds was strictly forbidden, but how could they stop such a person? Tajuddin had a special tree under which he would meet people. Having no private room, he would sleep in a large dormitory with other inmates who felt at peace in his presence. One day, one of his lunatics escaped. Abdul Majid Khan, a doctor in charge of asylum, was terribly worried, but Tajuddin approached the doctor and told him, "Do not be anxious, he will come back tomorrow." The very next day, the fellow returned. On inquiry, he said, "I went to my home, but Tajuddin Baba met me there, and after giving me 2 hard slaps across my face, he ordered me to come back here immediately, so I came back." After this incident, Dr. Majid developed faith and devotion for Tajuddin, and he would invite him to his home and consult him on all matters. Thus, the man in charge of the asylum became Tajuddin's devoted disciple. Once Dr. Majid had a pressing appointment and asked Tajuddin if he could go to Bombay. Tajuddin refused to give him permission to go, warning, "The road is dangerous," but the doctor insisted. Reluctantly, Tajuddin granted him permission, but giving him a leaf from a nearby tree, he said, "Carry this with you while you are traveling." The doctor left Nagpur by train and reached Bombay seemingly safely. But after the train stopped, he tried to take a shortcut across the railway track to the station instead of using the overpass bridge, and tripped just as the train was pulling in. Miraculously, the train screeched to a halt just few feet from his body, and everyone at the station was astonished at his escape. Now he realized why Tajuddin had been so hesitant about allowing him to leave Nagpur. After several years in the asylum, word of Tajuddin Baba began to spread to distant corners of India, and people thronged to the asylum for his blessings. The spiritual atmosphere surrounding Tajuddin's presence was intoxicating. An ecstasy frenzy filled the air. The madhouse suddenly turned into a divine wine shop where thirsting souls could drink to their heart's content. A new madness was spreading. People became mad for God, for the wonderful company of Tajuddin Baba. Day by day, the numbers increased, creating a problem for the asylum officers. officials. At first, they erected a separate gateway leading to the tree where Tajuddin would be seated. Then the crowd became too large. To dissuade and lessen the crowd, the government officials of Nagpur issued entry tickets to only a fixed number, but this system failed. The fragrance of Tajuddin's wine spread throughout India, driving people mad to see him, a Kutab, a man who had become God-conscious and represented the center of the world. The governing officials of the city and the asylum were at loss as to how to handle the situation. Finally, the police were directed to control the crowds. Tajuddin Baba was becoming a leading spiritual figure of the area. Among those who came to his darshan was a Muslim girl who had the same name as his mother, Mariambi. This girl came to Tajuddin with an inner thirst that would drink the wine shop dry. Mariambi came for the master's real darshan with the desire to lose everything at his feet. When Mariambi approached Tajuddin, he took her arm and broke her glass bangles with a stone. This external act freed her from all external bindings and attachments in the world. The master then embraced her and she inwardly detached herself from this world. She belonged to him and became wholly Tajuddin Baba's. I have been waiting for you, my dear, for the past 12 years, he told her, and at last you have come to me. It was at this moment that Mariambi became spiritually connected with Tajuddin for the rest of her life. After this profound contact with Tajuddin, she visited him daily in the asylum. Later, when he was freed, she was destined to be always at his side. In Mariambi's company, Tajuddin would always appear happy. He loved this girl, especially he poured the whole wine shop into her cup. She was among the chosen circle. It was under the personal instruction of the Qutub Hazrat Daud Chishti that Mariambi had gone to Tajuddin. Daud Chishti told her, "It is at Tajuddin's feet, not mine, that you should be surrendering everything." When she did, she gained everything. Tajuddin Baba possessed nothing material. The master personified a perfect fakir. Once, while he was in the asylum, a woman was brought to him who was suffering intensely from the possession of a spirit. Tajuddin eyed her, then spat in her face, shouting, "Why are you so bold and insolent with fakirs?" As soon as he uttered these words, the woman swooned and fell unconscious. When she regained consciousness, there was a glow of relief on her face. The ghost had been released by the master. A Hindu king named Raja Raghuji Rao Bhosle, who also became devoted to Tajuddin, was one of the Maharajas of the district. At the slightest hint, Bhosle was ready to dedicate everything he owned to Tajuddin. Once he was of royalty in Nagpur, he would often come to the asylum for Tajuddin's advice and blessings. One day it was dawned on Raja Bhosle that the crowds at the asylum were becoming intolerable, and he decided he must have Tajuddin freed at any cost. It seemed the master had finished his work in the asylum and wished to change seats. This he hinted to the Raja. Raja Bhosle went to the authorities and begged them to free Tajuddin. At first the officials adamantly refused because the city was prospering from the revenue of many new visitors. Tajuddin Baba was indeed Nagpur's greatest tourist attraction. In September 1908, after posting a sizable bond of 2,000 rupees, Raja Bhosle brought Tajuddin to live at his palace, called Shakardara, in the heart of Nagpur. The Raja gave Tajuddin his own private bungalow, called Lal Koti, the Red House, a few hundred yards from the palace. Tajuddin was then 47 years old. After over 16 years in the mental asylum, Tajuddin was now residing comfortably in the palace of the king of Nagpur. But a fakir is, after all, always a fakir, one without any worldly possessions except the barest necessities. Tajuddin did not retire to the life of a king, but he continued to look after the good of those who needed him spiritually. In his palace, Raja Bhosle kept one room separate where he would perform his daily prayers and worship ceremonies. When Tajuddin first moved into Raja's compound, he would go to that room and defecate and urinate 3 times a day in front of the stone Hindu idol that Raja prayed to. This supposedly sacred room had become the master's toilet, but the Raja's faith in Tajuddin's perfection was so deep that he humbly cleaned it himself without taking it as an insult to his religious practices. After staying in Nagpur at Raja's Red House for several months, Tajuddin moved his headquarters to Waki, a suburb about 18 kilometers outside of Nagpur. There he lived at the home of a Hindu disciple named Kashinath Rao Patel, who had a large estate. The property was suitable for Tajuddin's purposes because many people gathered daily for the master's darshan, swarming in such numbers that a township sprung up on the estate. Tajuddin officially renamed the town Chota Nagpur, meaning Little Nagpur. At Chota Nagpur, Tajuddin rearranged the estate's land into certain sections for his activities. A specific piece of land was kept vacant, which he named Waki Sharif, meaning the noble town, and which he divided into 5 main sections that surrounded his abode. Toward the west, a quarter of a mile away, Tajuddin had his dispensary. The strange dispensary consisted of no medical facilities or doctors. It was a solitary mango tree under which sick and diseased were told by Tajuddin to stay. By remaining underneath that mango tree, Tajuddin's patients would automatically be cured. The spiritual physician's sight or nazar alone would heal them. Near the mango dispensary, Tajuddin pointed to a spot and named it Madarsa, meaning the school. Students who would be seeking Tajuddin's help to pass their examination, and he would oblige them by instructing them to simply sit in the madarsa. Inevitably, all the boys and girls who came past their examinations. Another barren plot was called the court. In Tajuddin's court, those who suffered in the business or financially, or who were in trouble with a lawsuit or a court case were sent. Inevitably, those troubled businessmen also found relief. Another place near his seat, Tajuddin called his mosque. The mosque was for those who came to the Qutb for only spiritual purposes and were longing for spiritual experiences or even sight of God. In his mosque, these experiences were best out. Towards the north was an open field which Tajuddin named the parade ground. Here the master would send people to do physical exercises which had spiritual significance. By exercising or marching back and forth, the master was preparing those people to fight the battle of life, the battle with their egos or lower selves. Inevitably, those two were guided into right direction. It was as if Waki Sharif had become a fairgrounds for the spiritual carnival. Daily this carnival took place. Every kind of disease or mundane problems were treated by the wine dripping from Tajuddin Baba's loving gaze. His nazar was remedy, and no one left Waki Sharif empty-handed or empty-hearted. One day at Waki Sharif, while it was raining heavily, Tajuddin was observed pacing back and forth in the shower, followed by a large crowd. At one point, he left ground and headed for the road. He happened to spot a dog lying down on the road which had been dead for 3 days. Tajuddin approached the carcass and touching it said, "Why are you lying here, my friend? Get up and run." The dog sprung back to life and scurried away. As Tajuddin's spiritual reputation spread, his relatives gradually came to accept him as someone great. One time his aunt made him tea. He refused to drink it and pointing to his left, he told her, "Take this tea to a fox lying dead in that field." The old man did as instructed. When she poured a little of the tea down the animal's throat, the fox shook, stood up, and ran away. The miracle that caused a great sensation in Nagpur concerned a professional singer named Surji. She was famous for an exquisitely sweet voice and often entertained Tajuddin. It It is said that she became seriously ill and despite all possible treatment expired. Hearing the news, Raja Bhosle informed Tajuddin that Surji had died. Tajuddin became irritated and angrily said, "You are lying, she is alive. If she were to die, who would come to sing before me? Go and tell her relatives not to disturb her body." The Raja returned to the house where a woman's body was being prepared for cremation and delivered Tajuddin's message. Having faith in Master's words, the relatives postponed the ceremony, and as Tajuddin had indicated, the woman opened her eyes the next morning. He raises the dead became the talk of Nagpur for weeks. One day during 1915, an exceptional looking individual in his early 20s, accompanied by a friend, came to see Tajuddin Baba, who was holding darshan at Waqi Sharif. As that handsome young man entered the room, Tajuddin stood up and their eyes met. No one in the crowd knew the hidden message or inner communication their glances conveyed. Tajuddin then approached the young man and, taking some roses in his hand, mysteriously waved them like a wand over a stranger's head and face. After this, the stranger and his companion bowed to the Qutub and left. We take a pause here at page 43 end and resume with Baba's grace tomorrow. Avtar Meher Baba ki jai. Avtar Meher Baba ki jai. Avtar Meher Baba ki jai.